Hello and welcome to my comprehensive, absolutely this is correct theory, not even theory, it's fact. Everything I say is complete fact on FNAF 4. Now, this game is very nice in the sense that there are no phone calls that I'm gonna have to try and read through on the wiki that I'm gonna reload a million times because the wiki doesn't know what it's doing. So that's nice. In fact, there are pretty much no sources of information in this because this game really was supposed to be the final game. And I guess Scott kind of figured we had all the pieces in place, so really all we learn is that there's a child, and that child is tormented by an older brother. He is called a brother in the text of the game, just because I know there are theories. Brother in a Foxy mask, then brother in Foxy mask and his friends in Chica, Bonnie, Freddy masks, put him up to Fredbear, he gets tossed in Fredbear, he dies. And honestly, that's it. That's all we learn in FNAF 4. It's great, and we don't really learn anything. It just leaves us with a bunch of questions. And frankly, the questions honestly at the time were really just whatever it was confirming Dream Theory. I'm convinced when this game came out, I hate Dream Theory, to be clear, do not like Dream Theory, hate it with a passion. But I do think this game was originally supposed to be pointing us towards game theory. In fact, I'm almost convinced of that. Just because I think, but obviously it doesn't anymore, right? Just with future games and books and all of that, just kind of gone out of their way to confirm that's not true. But yeah, I do think at the time, game theory was with Dream Theory. Game theory. Dream Theory was the kind of yes, this is what we're pointing towards. Everything was just a dream. And terrible. Hate those kind of theories. They're boring and kind of just cop outs, really. But I do think that was the intended solution at the time. But that's obviously not it anymore. So let's see what's happened since then. And since we now know there are future games and books that have, obviously come out after Crying Child's death, and yes, it was a death. There's a flat line. So Crying Child's definitely dead. Obviously, there's all the dialogue, I guess, in the game from Fredbear, but it's not really we just kind of learn, oh, remember what you saw, and it's all vague, and they're all kind of questions that'll come up in their own right. We are still your friends, do you believe that? And all that. I think the first question we should really address with FNAF 4 is Crying Child's name. And, there's been a lot, some with a little bit more evidence than others, I think. The fandom, certain part of the fandom, went for Chris, kind of the same part that named, the murderers Vincent and Foxy Bros Terrence. And then they obviously got names, and those kind of characters were left to rot. I mean, some people have them now as separate characters, extra siblings, which is fun for a fandom thing, but there's no evidence for that. But unfortunately, we still don't have a name for Crying Child, so a lot of people still call him Chris. Obviously, there's Evan from the Foxy Grid, although I think the Chipotle. I've seen so many of his videos because they keep getting recommended to me, but I don't know his channel name. The Chipotle. He's the one who did Outer Spring Lock Suits work and all that. And yeah, I'll try and put his channel name or his channel homepage or something up in editing because I can't think of it right now. So, but yeah, he pretty much we did a good breakdown of maybe what the Foxy Grid. How Evan doesn't really work as a solution. MatPat also pointed out that it's not a great solution, that it's a bit sloppy, that it requires kind of taking multiple things to get Evan, so it's just, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to... Evan might not be as dead certain as we are sure that it is. I don't think there have really been any other names for Crying Child. I think those are kind of the two, and one's a pure fandom name. Yeah, I mean, there could be joke names. I know, William Afton Jr., but I guess Gregory. Right, Gregory, if he's a robot Crying Child, would probably be the Crying Child's name. But I think I have a better and different solution. And also, I don't want to talk about the whole Gregory being a robot grandchild theory here. I want to save that for my security breach video. Do you think I'm stupid? I know how the content game works, okay? I'm only slightly stupid. But I also just genuinely think I have a better answer and solution to all of this. And frankly, I'm just going to say it. I don't see people liking it, but I think his name is Cassidy. I think the Crying Child's name is Cassidy. And to be clear, I don't think that him and the one you should not have killed share a name, and I don't think he's the one you should not have killed. I do think they are separate. I just think that we interpreted I think we interpreted the logbook wrong, the survival logbook. I don't think that Cassidy is the name of the one you should not have killed. I don't. Because if you... What am I trying to say? Okay, the evidence for that, right, is there are 3 souls in the survival logbook for this. You don't know. One who speaks in grey text, one who manipulates the contents of the book, and then there's Michael writing in red pen. That's confirmed, so we don't really need to question who red pen is. We know that's Michael. When we look at the other 2 and actually compare them to the Stitch Wraith, and not to throw any shade, especially not on a man who's retiring and a man who's been, really an idol and a symbol of what you can do and an inspiration to me. Not to throw shade on him, but Batman is really the one who I think. I remember he's the one who was like, oh yeah, this is going to be the one you should not have killed's name. This is going to be the one you should not have killed's name. Because he was trying to find all the names on the gravestones. But I don't think it is. Because if you look at... Well, actually, if you look at the Stitch Wraith, right, his evidence was, look at the text, look at the Stitch Wraith. I don't think I'm going to throw in Golden Freddy, because actually, if you look at the Stitch Wraith and you look at Golden Freddy, a lot of just details line up between those 2. Like, for example, so in the Stitch Wraith, we learn that one of them, the Crying Child parallel, Jake, is in control of the Stitch Wraith, can communicate, can see, can hear. And the other one, the Andrew, the one you should not have killed parallel, is then, interestingly, he can't see, he can't hear, he's not in control. The fan wiki says he can move it around, but he just can't see and communicate. I don't know if that's true. I know he's the one who has the agonizing touch, but Jake is definitely the one who's actually, he can see, he can hear, he can communicate with the outside world. And again, compare that to Golden Freddy, which a lot of people are like, oh yeah, this is clearly a Golden Freddy parallel. You have the one you should not have killed. Then you have Jake, who's Crying Child parallel, but weaker parallel there. But it kind of works to fill in the blanks. Where am I going with this? Jake is one. And then if you compare that to Golden Freddy, right? If you compare that to Golden Freddy, it's me, right? It's me as by this point pretty firmly agreed that that's Crying Child speaking to Michael. It kind of has to be. If I remember, the logbook is the one that links Michael to kind of every location. And it kind of proves they have to be Golden Freddy talking to Michael, because, it's me. Who else would it be? It's not going to be the one you should not have killed, because what relationship or connection do they have to Michael? We have no evidence of that. It does not make sense to be it's me, unless it's Crying Child. So Crying Child is the one who communicates in Golden Freddy, and possibly the one you should not have killed might be the one who kills us, maybe. It could be Crying Child, because not exactly like he wouldn't have a motivation to kill Michael, but so I would still probably, if you look at the Stitch Wraith and Golden Freddy, it's a dead parallel. And now, compare that to the survival logbook, right? And the Grey, so logically, the Grey speaker, the one whose name is Cassidy, would be Crying Child, right? Because he's white in Fnaf 4 and Michael's grey, so this family kind of has that colour connection. So the idea that he'd be grey post-death, like a bit darker, makes sense. And also the symbology, right, of the gravestone. The fact that there is a gravestone, and the fact that it is Michael who draws the gravestone, and then the Grey speaker inscribes, my name, right? And we have to work it out. I think it is very interesting, and my name appears from the Grey Speaker just again and again and again and again and again, so it's pretty clear the point of this book was to get the name of the Grey Speaker, who I believe makes sense to be Crying Child, because Michael drawing a stone is just an impulse, like, it's an interesting piece of symbology, that if he's the one who killed Crying Child, right, and then he is the one who killed Crying Child, if he's the one who killed the Grey Speaker, it kind of makes sense that he'd be drawing the gravestone, symbolically representing he's the reason that grave exists. And then it also just makes more sense to me that this book is about two brothers, with then the third spirit kind of being separate from it all. I think that makes a whole hell of a lot more sense than, oh, Crying Child's over here, and his brother and the one who should not have killed is over here partying it up. That doesn't, to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think, and also I just think, again, like, if you look at the Stitch Race parallels, that, like, and the Golden Freddy parallels, the one who speaks is Crying Child, or the Crying Child equivalent, and the one who doesn't, and is just, like, manipulating things from the background, should be the one who should not have killed. I think that just makes a lot more sense, to be perfectly honest. So when you then compare that to the logbook, right, it's the same. So the Grey Speaker has to be Crying Child, which means Crying Child's name has to be Cassidy. And also just look at the things the Grey Speaker says, like, like, was your favourite toy as a child a purple telephone? Was your, was your favourite ride the carousel? Do you still dream? What do you see in the mirror is one which links to the end, which proves that our protagonist, Mike, is very clear. I mean, there's a lot of connections to this location, obviously. But what do you see in the mirror is an interesting connection to the Ennard ending, where he looks in the mirror. And also could kind of be a do you feel guilty kind of thing. I believe there's one page where Crying Child is like, do these seem familiar? And there's a bunch of toys, some of which from FNAF 4, drawn out over the book pages, and I think that's very interesting in its kind of own right. But like all of these connections, right, all of the things that Crying Child is saying, even like, do you still dream? It's all it makes sense, right, from sibling to sibling. It doesn't really make sense that the one you should not have killed would know about just any of these. So how would you know? How would you make the connection? Right? Like, it just has to be siblings. Unless obviously we're saying the Crying Child told the one you should not have killed, and then the one you should not have killed asked Mike, but that's just weird steps removed when you could just have them be brothers, and just all the evidence points towards the Crying Child being the Grey Speaker, all of it. So I think I'm firmly in the camp, it's Cassidy Afton. And also, look at the names of the family, right? You have William, which can be shortened to Bill, Billy, Willie, Will, right? And then you have Elizabeth, could be shortened to Beth, Betty, Ellie, Eliza. Like, there are all the ways you can shorten Elizabeth. There are way too many to list off here. Then Mike can be shortened, or Michael can be shortened to Mike, right? You have kind of long, not really posh names, but long names that then are shortened. That's kind of the Afton family's MO. I mean, even Sean, kind of, in a way. And then Evan, right? It doesn't fit the pattern of naming for this family. Cassidy does, right? Cassidy can be shown to Cass or Cassie. It's not. So it seems well within the realm of possibility that, like, yeah, Cassidy would just be the kind of fifth Afton child's name. Hell, even, like, there are other characters, obviously, with names that can be shortened, but the Aftons always have that. I mean, even from the movie, right? Vanessa can be shortened to Ness. That's about it. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah, you see what I'm saying. Yeah, like, all of the names can be shortened. All of the names even associated. Except Henry, I guess, but he's definitely not an Afton. I guess Clara also can't be shortened, but we don't even know that that's Miss Afton's name. Except I do think it's the best name we have. But she's also not, like, genetically an Afton. All of the genetic Aftons have that running trait. Not to say that everyone with a long name that could be shortened in this franchise is an Afton, but it is a pretty big connection. However, I realise that this puts us in the exact same spot we were before, except with the one you should not have killed, right? What's the one you should not have killed name? I don't know. I mean, I will say, I mean, Andrew, I mean, like, the man from room 18? Hang on, I have this somewhere. Just let me get my note up. I keep trying to commit this to memory, and I keep not, and that's not it's not helping. Here we go. 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 The man in room 1280. There we go. Sorry for our brief interlude. If I ever monetize these videos, I'll try and put an ad there. Just skip past that because I'm not convinced I can edit it out. I don't have the editing skills. The man in room 1280. Right, in the titular man, with Andrew, like, we learn their names, and the man becomes the Afton amalgamation. He is clearly Afton. So the idea that Andrew could be the one who should not have killed his name seems good to me. I will say though that we see someone with presumably Andrew's mask with the like not being freed souls, implying that maybe he's already freed or something. Happiest day, which to me weakens that theory a bit. But on the other hand, if we go back to the original novel series, we might already have a name for the one you should not have killed. Right, like if we got Charlotte's name, and we got Henry's name, and we got William's name, I think the book with Elizabeth in came out after Sister Location, so we didn't get that name, but that name is still consistent, unlike the movie, which calls William Afton's daughter, that he's manipulating into doing what he wants, and is evil, but maybe good under the surface, Vanessa, for some reason, instead of just using the name Elizabeth. Right? Elizabeth is consistent in the book. So, all of these names, three of which we know, well, two of which we know are correct that we got from the books, one of which continued to be correct into the books, and one of which the fandom generally agrees on. So, we have one soul in the books who we know is inside of Golden Freddy, and that soul is Michael Brooks. Like, we have. So in the books, we meet 5 people, each of whom are souls inside the animatronics. Cassidy, Susie, an unnamed striped shirt kid in the books, but then in the graphic novels is renamed and redesigned to Gabriel, and then also Fritz. And Fritz, that doesn't. We don't learn any of their animatronics. The only things that are confirmed is that Susie possesses Funtime Foxy, which we'll get to, and that Michael Brooks possesses Golden Freddy. So notably, there is a girl called Cassidy who, first off, that just doesn't line up with the one you should not have killed, because the one you should not have killed is referred to as he repeatedly throughout the game. And keep in mind, he's the one who made Ultimate Custom Night, so he is a pretty accurate. So we just have to assume those are his pronouns. So a girl named Cassidy already doesn't make sense. But then notably, the only animatronic and soul who we know is Golden Freddy is Michael Brooks. That's it. We don't know where any of the other souls go. The games now have pretty much confirmed, but through the novels they're not confirmed, except for Michael Brooks being Golden Freddy, which is interesting. So notably, there is a girl called Cassidy who is not possessing Golden Freddy at all. But obviously, that's not true because later we know that Jeremy is the one inside of Bonnie. So technically, it doesn't confirm anything, but it does at least tell me that out of the missing children, Cassidy is not possessing Golden Freddy. Well, that name was probably removed from the roster of missing children because it was being used elsewhere. Technically, it could be used for the Golden Freddy soul, but to me that doesn't make sense. I mean, this game series does not really have a problem with reusing names. I mean, I would like to point you towards Cassie and every use of Jeremy, which I believe at this point is in the 4s. This game series does not have a problem reusing names. So I guess Michael Afton and Michael Brooks could be 2 separate. They could be. I mean, we learn that it's Charlie's childhood friend, Michael Brooks. So I could see a world where, maybe they were stuffed inside of Golden Freddy, because they'd been friends with the Emilys, and kind of, Fredbear seems like he was, Henry's kind of Springlock suit, whereas in like Spring Bonnie was William's. Um, yeah, I do think it's interesting. So that could just be the name there, but I can understand why that maybe isn't convincing to people. I just think that that novel series, like that novel series gives pretty much all the names except for Jeremy of the missing children. So it seems like it would at least indicate that Michael, and it gives Charlie's name and Williams and Henry's. So it feels like it should probably be giving us the one you should not have killed's name with Michael Brooks. Like, Michael Brooks is also notably the one who gets William in the end of the first book. So, like, definitely kind of vengeful there. And again, it's confirmed he possessing Godfrey. Like, that just seems to make sense to me. So for now, I'd probably refer to the. So for now, I'm pretty sure that the names are Crying Child being Cassidy Afton and the one you should not have killed being Michael Brooks. Although, for the sake of simplicity, I'll probably either refer to the one you should not have killed as the one you should not have killed, or maybe Mike B, Michael B, or Brooke, because that's. Well, Brooks, because that's probably going to be easier than confusing everyone between Michael and, Michael Afton and Michael Brooks. So that's probably going to be a lot simpler. It also feels. I could also see a world in which maybe William killed someone called Michael because he didn't want to kill his actual son, but was also mad at Michael, which would maybe explain why Michael would have ended up inside of, the Golden Freddy suit. That feels like that. That feels like it makes sense to me. So that's nice. One other name theory, and it's just a personal theory of mine, is the name Spring Bonnie. Because I never really liked Spring Bonnie because it was the original, so really every Bonnie afterwards should be a variant of that Bonnie. But I personally think that the name of Spring Bonnie, like the actual animatronic's name, right? Okay, let's go from Freddy Fazbear to Fredbear, right? So you take the shortened version of the name Freddy, you get Fred, and you take his species, bear, and you put that on, you get Fredbear. So if we're logical, we take Bonnie the bunny, or Bonnie the rabbit. Bonnie the bunny works better, and the fandom refers to it as Bonnie Bunny. And we take Bon, shortened version of Bonnie, and then we take Bunny, Bon Bunny, or Bon Bun, if you wanted to shorten it, because Fazbear is technically his last name. So you could either have Bon Bunny or Bon Bun. And personally, I think those names are significantly better as like a Spring Bonnie name than Spring Bonnie, or just referring to both characters as Bonnie when Fredbear's name, when like Freddy was changed, right? So that's just a personal theory of mine. I like Bonnie, Bon Bun, or Bon Bunny. Bon Rabbit doesn't really work, or Bon Rab. They suck. So Bon Bunny. And I think Bon Bunny is just a great name. I love that name. And I think that name should be canon. So for now on, I'm just going to refer to it as Bon Bunny or Bon Bun. Because I think that's just adorable and it makes sense as a child's character. So, on to the next. So now that we've sorted out all these names, and I'm sure no one will have any qualms or arguments about that in the comment section. Definitely, no one's gonna question. No one's gonna have problems with them. Onto the gameplay. And frankly, I was quite ready to write this theory off now. I mean, the gameplay of FNAF 4 is a dream. I mean, what else lore do you need? It's pretty clearly a dream. I mean, I've personally never been convinced by any of the evidence for there being illusion discs in the games. Like, Funtime Freddy, right? Like his secondary power module that you remove. Like I've heard people say, like, "Oh, that looks like it's an illusion disc in the books," but like when you take it off, it doesn't change his appearance. It doesn't change your appearance. It doesn't make sense that it would be an illusion disc because there's no evidence. There's also we're told what it is, and why would okay, admittedly, Hand Unit does try and get us killed a few times, so Hand Unit maybe isn't the most trustworthy, but Hand Unit calls it a secondary power module, and like if this is where William works, why would William have Hand Unit actively, confuse him? That doesn't make any sense. Although it doesn't make sense. But, I've always seen Hand Unit telling you the wrong information as Hand Unit simply being uninformed. Or, not having the known information because, obviously, he's I've always just seen it as Hand Unit being confused. I've never seen it as Hand Unit being actively malicious. It doesn't make sense that William would have coded Hand Unit to tell him the wrong parts to remove, since he would know where the right parts are. And then, like, there's a little lump on the nightmare endoskeleton. It must be an illusion. I've never been convinced by any of the evidence for an illusion disc. Even, like, the whole nightmare is a failing Fredbear illusion disc. It's like, well, is it though? Because, like, if you actually look at the two of those, like, well, actually, if you look at the gameplay, already, like, the whole illusionist, like, how do you explain the Freddles? I'm sorry, are we saying that at this point, one of the earliest points in the timeline that we, like, actually get to see, are we seriously saying that, oh, they're a light-sensitive or light-reactive illusion disc? Just like, I could see maybe a Foxy in the closet when you, like, close the door, like, oh, that's dampening the sound of the illusion disc, and then it's, like, no longer able to cause an illusion. If that was the case, though, you'd think we'd see the endoskeleton or Foxy's true form as just like as the twisted ones are described throughout their illusion disc in the books, not a Foxy plush. Like that's very dreamy. The fact that things can kind of fade in and out, like the pills and the IV drip and the flowers. Again, that's very dream. It will just make like the way the Freddles work like that. Again, like sensitive illusion just doesn't make sense to me. And like, why is there like a nightmare Freddy under the like bed and just like why would Foxy run into the closet? Would he program that into the animatronic? And then like, did he go around change all of these illusion discs so that there's a Fredbear head in the closet, and so there's a Fredbear head on the book, and make it so all those pieces of technology, like to my knowledge, one can only happen at a time. I could be wrong, but did he like code it in that way? Like, do the gameplay would stay similar? Like, he would have had to change the illusion disc on the endoskeleton behind the bed to make it look like Nightmare, to make it look like Fredbear's jump scaring you. And then, like, are we saying that all of these illusion discs, all of them, managed to fail at the same time in the exact same way to produce Nightmare? And are we then saying that are we then ignoring the brain inside of Nightmare? Like, I am not convinced. Like, that these are illusion disc experiments, and like Nightmare gas, I guess makes sense, but we'll get to that. Yeah, so I was ready to write that theory off. And, like, I get that there are people who are like, oh, it's Michael's dream after having gone through it, but then that just feels like too many steps removed. It just, like, then we're saying, like, oh, the mini games happen at one of the earliest points in the timeline, and the gameplay happens, like, it would have to be at least after FNAF 3, but I can actually disprove that there. Because, like, Plush Trap, logically, like, as opposed to just being Plush Trap's weird, like, realistically, it should be after FNAF 3 a Plush Trap exists, but then, like, did William happen to create an illusion that looks like, but then, like, did Crying Child happen to dream up an illusion that looks like Springtrap? It does it. Plush Trap is just weird. Plush Trap is just weird, and he's, like, just whatever, but, like, if he's based off of the, like, Finger Trap, like, oh, okay, then, you can kind of get away with that. Yeah, but like then why wouldn't Spring Bonnie or Springtrap actually appear in Michael's dreams? And like forget all of that. Why like I'm willing to say like, oh, the toys wouldn't appear because he's scared of the characters. We're getting nightmare versions of Chica, that just includes every version of Chica he's ever seen. I'd even be willing to apply that to the fun times, but then where's Ballora? Where's Baby? And most importantly, where's Ennard or the Scooper in the supposed dreams that Michael is having? One of the latest points of the time, look, I'm not convinced. And yes, I know that FNAF 1 phone call is there, but to me that just tells us that, like, it's distorted and backwards, which immediately makes me wonder how trustworthy it is. Like, there's also a dog barking. Are we saying that Michael would have witnessed the missing children's incident based off that? Like, no, I wouldn't. I just think that it's such a stretch, you know? I think like overlooking the IV and the pills, all clearly linking, and the flowers, all clearly linking to Crying Child, to be like, but this phone call that you can barely make out and have to like basically take from the game, you have to unreverse it and you have to undistort it. Like it's putting too much emphasis on it. I'd say, like to me, I'd say the main takeaway of that is that whoever's having these dreams, I mean, if they're dreams, which we'll get to, like whoever's having these dreams has heard phone guy talk, and like Jeremy Fitzgerald, if you believe my theories, which I obviously do, Jeremy Fitzgerald talk, like, well, why wouldn't we just assume that Crying Child has? We know he was doing the whole Springlock thing, so wouldn't that, to me, that seems like a more reasonable takeaway from that piece of evidence. Like, don't necessarily write it off, but also don't put too much emphasis on it, I think. So to me, I was ready to say, like, okay, great. Yeah, it's dreams, it's clearly dreams, and we can write it all off. Because, admittedly, I'm going to be honest, by this point, I didn't actually realise that there were observation decks in the breaker room and sister location. Like, I knew there was a map with, like, the sister location and FNAF 4 above it, which I guess would technically prove these locations were different places. But I didn't realise that they were rooms that were getting power from sister location, and also that they were rooms that were getting and also that they were called observation rooms. And I could maybe have explained that away as, oh, he's observing crying child as he sleeps. Maybe he is doing experiments on nightmares of a child because he knows his son's having nightmares anyway. Maybe he wants to observe his child to keep him safe. We don't have to assume the worst here, which is why I also don't like the whole Michael's dreaming later theory, because it then means we're not seeing the actual event, and it just doesn't, to me, leave enough evidence that this event even ever happened. Right? So I would say that, yeah, okay. But then, okay, great, this is Michael being tortured, but then, how do you explain all these dreamy, supernatural stuff? That doesn't make sense to me. If it's just William's experiments, but I could maybe have written off just the observation deck theory until they had to release a book which just happened to have according to Write-Host, and not to throw Write-Host under the bus here, but this is all according to Write-Host, so if it's wrong, please take all complaints to at rileytoastly@gmail.com. Okay, but according to Right Host, it has a perfect description of the FNAF 4 house and the sister location bunker. Perfect, dead-on descriptions. And if that's the case, then the fact it's telling us that Nightmare Gas was involved could be telling us maybe an earlier version of Illusion Disc, which is nicer, I think. I think it makes more sense that William would have access to Nightmare Gas than full-on Illusion Disc. But it still doesn't explain all the supernatural shit that's happening, It still doesn't explain, and like, but it clearly proves that this is supposed to be an experiment, and just, well, as you probably heard, it's very difficult. But I think I might have an explanation. Now, admittedly, the evidence is a bit limited. That satisfies everyone, and the solution is that what if crying child is involved? Everyone's kind of thinking, that William performed these experiments on Michael. But what's the point, right? What's the point in are we seeing constant terror? What's the exact point? But what if Crying Child is either torturing Michael with these nightmares, or is at least involved in the experiments? Because we know William's whole goal, right, is I'm going to put you back together. What if he did? Right? What if he in some way managed to kind of put Crying Child in the nightmares, kind of made him manifest? Because if you remember, I said that the phantoms were likely generated from William's agony. So maybe the nightmares. Crying Child probably suffered some of the worst agony. He seems like he died slowly in a coma after getting his head crushed, which I can't imagine is a painless experience. He was getting pills, so he must have been at least somewhat awake to have been able to eat. And I assume the pills were for pain because there's no way you're recovering from that. And then also he was he was constantly terrified at the various of these characters that his family seemed to have a strong connection to. His brother constantly scared him. And I guess we don't know he was having nightmares, but he's still I would still say he likely did have nightmares, even if they're not necessarily the gameplay of FNAF. That's not exactly a stretch. And then I think, but even the Freddy Krueger-esque, it's pretty clear that the game was intended to be nightmares, and I honestly think Scott probably could have left it nightmares, but it's pretty clear that's not what he intends. In the books, he's very clearly making it clear what his creative vision is, and it pretty clearly he believes FNAF 4. He's pretty clear trying to tell us FNAF 4 is an experiment. And I think it could maybe be William's experimental soul. I think maybe William took agony from the Crying Child's body, or maybe these creatures were generated from agony originally, and William in some way, shape, or form. We know eventually William had a scooper, right? Scooper capable of manipulating remnants, so maybe at some point he had an early version that manipulated agony. He managed to trap agony in these robots to give them this scary physical form, and that was kind of because, again, it's very supernatural, and if it's not a dream, it feels like there has to be a ghost involved. the whole fading in and out kind of thing that we see from the pills and the IV and the flowers. Like, it seems like to me like that even feels reminiscent of like the newspapers in FNAF 1. So I kind of feel like there has to be a ghost involved, and I feel like the most likely candidate for there to be a ghost involved is Crying Child. Clearly, his soul has not been taken out of Golden Freddy because it's still there during FNAF 1, but I would say it also actually there is evidence. Originally, the evidence was that Nightmare had a brain, but upon further research, it apparently is just part of the endoskeleton. By further research, I mean further research I did just now. So, unfortunately, that major piece of evidence that there was a human brain in control of Nightmare really went by the wayside. But, my friends, I still have a great solution, and that's that. How does the one you should not have killed? How does Michael Brooks know about the nightmares? Because he shouldn't. I'll tell you that much. He shouldn't know about the nightmares. Because when you think about it, right? Like he's the one creating Ultimate Custom Night, right? It's this torture for him, so he must know about the nightmares because he's putting them in his game. Someone must have told him about the nightmares, and I don't see who that could be except for Crying Child. But if the nightmares are experiments done by William on Michael post FNAF 4, post killing his brother, it seemed logical to me that there's no way Crying Child could know about them. So Crying Child must have been involved after his death, or they were just his nightmares in the first place. But again, doesn't appear to be the way Scott's going with the lore based on the books. So I personally would be quite happy to say that is nightmares. But again, the books really and the whole observation room would imply there's maybe something a bit more experimenty going on here. So, to me, though I guess the most likely to consolidate all of the evidence we have, the most likely seems to be the Crying Child's soul, or at least agony, is in some way, shape, or form involved here. It does seem like souls can be split across animatronics. I also feel like that then is interesting because if we're saying Shadow Freddy is Crying Child, which I did in my FNAF 2 theory, I said that the shadows seem to be like dark remnant manifestations of dark remnant, which seems to be like maybe remnant plus agony or metal plus agony or something like that. Manifestations of dark remnant to take a physical form that are then possessed by a soul, which might mean that dark remnant is agony. We'll get to that. And so maybe kind of a prior to that, because I'm saying like oh, William put his agony into the robots, and that's why that's why Jeremy phone guy has 2 points where it's like the animatronics are acting differently and weirdly, and like both times it seems that this weird acting is different. So I'm thinking the first one is the dead children possess the animatronics, and the second one is he interjects them with his agony to put the child's soul under his control. So by this point William would have to know about agony. So what if this was an agony experiment? What if agony led to the generation of the nightmares, and then William managed to capture them, give them kind of physical form in some ways, and then kind of Crying Child draw them to life? Or what if this whole thing is Crying Child, right? Who's they? I mean, I guess it still would imply there's. It also implies there's something to do with the sister location bunker, which we do know, like the FNAF 4 bedroom is connected to Funtime Foxy's auditorium, which is interesting, right? The Foxy bro. And then the plush trap trade, which also, the whole tiny, when you win plush trap, you skip 2 hours in the night. How does that work? Because I refuse to believe that with any amount of science, William could ever skip time. But we know Crying Child can teleport going ready around, so. And maybe William was just dragging Michael from one to the other, and it takes 2 hours. But that's kind of it's a bit goofy. I think it makes a bit more sense that maybe Crying Child could literally be like manipulating time here, right? If he's got control over it, if he's making things appear and disappear, if he's controlling this illusion, this dream, and I think William might just be watching the effects and seeing what a ghost can do, which might explain why he then seems to fear which would then explain how he even knows that the animatronics were possessed by for the point of FNAF 2, which, especially by the minigames that we see in FNAF 3. So, yeah, I think that is the best explanation. I really still think it should just be the Crying Child's dreams, but also that's not where the evidence is pointing, unfortunately. So I really think the evidence to me right now, if we take all the evidence together, which is what I really want to do with these theories. Is I want to take every last piece of evidence. I don't want to write anything off. Because we could just write off the entirety of FNAF 4. Oh, it was all a retcon. And we just remove all of that. But I don't like that. Because at that point it just makes the whole game, invalid, which I don't like. So, consolidating all of the evidence, I think it makes sense that there would be a ghost involved. The ghost involved seems like it has to be Crying Child. And then William is either helping create the machines that Crying Child, which might also explain how Foxy becomes a plushie, right? It's literally just like Crying Child snaps his fingers, and he just it teleports, right? The Foxy plush appears. Because also the Foxy plush is not the one we see in FNAF 4, because it's a fixed one, not a broken one. So that's interesting in its own right. Yeah, all of the supernatural stuff either has to be a dream, which seems to be like not where the game is right now, or it has to be Crying Child, or at least a soul, but Crying Child's the most likely candidate, manipulating everything. Now, is Crying also there's breathing, right? The animatronics breathe, which unless William has put that sound effect in them, like that. I don't want the kind of technology to be way too advanced. Like even the fun times, right? Don't breathe. But if we're saying that Crying Child's agony, or some part of Crying Child, probably some part of his soul at least, is within the nightmares, right, and is kind of bringing them to life, then it would make sense that they're breathing because it's Crying Child. Crying Child is generating that breath as a go. So I think that makes sense. It does make sense to me that these animatronics have a soul in them. It's like a very small part of a soul. I think that's what makes the most sense to be Crying Child. And also, I can prove this isn't just Crying Child doing all of this, because again, William's observing him, and again, the book with Rory in it, where he's getting possessed by nightmare gas, but also in the security breach, and this is where the evidence really comes in strong. Because in security breach, if you remember, there was this part where if you fell off, you ended up in space with all these staff or heads with the Nightmare on paint already linked to Nightmare on, but then they had these wooden bodies, and they had in your dreams and stuff like that written on them. What if that was? What if they were literally the marionettes that William was using? Because in Rory's story, it describes it as marionettes on strings, right? Right, which is notably different. So what if William was originally torturing Michael with nightmare gas and observing kind of the effects of nightmare gas? Oh, very interesting. But then, he manages to, in some way, shape, or form, put Crying Child back together. Ironically, by taking his soul apart and putting it in all these different animatronics, or somehow hive mind. And with Crying Child's help with his supernatural activities, he's able to effectively bring to life these nightmarish monstrosities. Is that he can then observe the effects of a ghost on someone, which is significantly more interesting. I think that makes the most sense. It also lines up with Matt Pat's interpretation of Midnight Motorist, that it is, which personally I think is the best interpretation anyone has had, that it is like Crying Child's soul leading Michael to his grave, because it does seem to fit the Springlock suits, and like it's not going to be William going after his own kid. Like I heard another theory, and I'll at least mention it in my FNAF 6 video, but I'm not. I think Matt Pat's pretty much solved that. So that would even indicate that yeah, Crying Child's soul is messing with him. Who's to say he's not involved in the experiments? I mean, William would presumably, and maybe this even explains why were the spring lawsuits shut down? Oh, William presumably, but he wanted to take the Golden Freddy suit, or Fredbear at this point, went and manipulate it, mess with it in a way that he could try and find Crying Child's soul, right? And that's what I think he was trying to do. So I think he took the Fredbear suit, and he must have succeeded. That he found these generations of agony, he managed to bring them to life, and then he managed to find Crying Child, and he managed to, in some way, possibly through agony, I think it makes a lot of sense that it'd be through agony. Through agony, he was able to put Crying Child's soul into each of these nightmares. As which then, even Nightmare is like a kind of nightmare version of Shadow Freddy, who is a shadow version of Golden Freddy. He's kind of a shadow version of Nightmare Fredbear. So it makes sense to me. And then, oh yeah, if Crying Child is who we're saying is in, or is at least one of the souls inside of Shadow Freddy, then yeah, it makes sense that he'd also be Nightmare. And maybe Nightmare came first. Maybe Shadow Freddy came first. We don't know when Shadow Freddy obviously would have been generated. But I suspect that that's what happened, and that's why then the spring lawsuit ends up in Freddie Feathers, because Williams basically, hallelujah, I've done it. I have in some way managed to put Cryingchild's soul, my son's soul, into these animatronics, and I've taken revenge upon Michael. And clearly there's all this ghostly stuff happening, so it must be Cryingchild's soul. And so that's my personal belief on what I think the gameplay of FNAF was right now. I do think Cryingchild was haunted by these nightmares in maybe a more of a kiddie nightmare sense, and then you get to like, the gameplay of FNAF 4, which is these nightmares have been brought to life through a mix of ghostly activity and Williams' technology, and he's now observing the effects of ghosts and constant terror on Michael. Switching out then the old marionettes, right? The old in your dream spots, but Ray switched them out for the actual, like, you know, technological marvels of the time that are the nightmares. I think is the best explanation. It could then also explain how the one you should not have killed even came up with the idea of ultimate custom night, because it's a very complex torture system. Like, that you can keep changing and you can keep manipulating, and you can add to it and you can take from it and you can change it in a very easy way. Like, it's a way to basically make sure he's always being tortured. He's feeling physical pain, he's also feeling stress, and you can throw him off his loop by changing things. It's a great torture system, actually. It's like great because it's a way that he never gets bored of it. He has to be constantly stressed, and if he fails, he dies in a painful way. But there's just enough success in there for him to never quite get used to the pain. I mean, it is just a beautiful torture system. Also, I should point out that in The Man in Room 1280, it even has him. It even says that it's a nightmare caused by him affecting parts of the brain. It's a nightmare. So, logically, I mean, what if the observation rooms was literally just Cryingchild going in, manifesting the nightmares, torturing Michael? Like, I don't know quite what it is, but I'm pretty sure Cryingchild's involved in the nightmares. Personally, I do think we see enough technology to be like, I think it's literal he is creating. And given the fact that like the plush trap room and the FNAF 4 bedroom are in completely separate location, it also tells me the sister location bunker is like not just the size of a house, it's significantly larger. Because there's presumably at least some good, because we see the FNAF 4 house on the map, and then we see the room, and we see the plush trap room. So it seems like they are separate locations where Michael is being put to be tortured, which I assume is, yeah. And I assume like at some point it goes from nightmare gas and marionettes on strings to Cryingchild basically running the whole thing, and like William getting an idea of how agony, and he might not even know that Cryingchild's soul is literally there, although it has to be for all the supernatural activity. But like he might just be trying to view the effects of agony. He might be affecting the soul. We don't know. But I think it makes sense then that Cryingchild could have told the one he should not have killed, like, just how great this torture system was for revenge on Michael, at which point the one you should not have killed takes his vengeance on William in the same way. I think that makes sense of where the one you should not have killed would have got the idea from, and also, like, we know they must have talked about it because he knows about the nightmares, so it's great. It's a great system. Great solution. In my opinion, it's the best solution we have that consolidates all the evidence that, like, William did do basically the effects we were seeing on Rory, and then he switches it at some point to maybe illusion discs with ghostly and agony. And also, it's worth pointing out that agony isn't the only emotion, right? Like, agony might be the most effective emotion, the strongest, I believe it says in the books, but presumably that would indicate that all emotions could have this effect. Cryingchild's very clearly sad and scared, which would also presumably commit to it, so it makes sense to me, then yeah. Like, Cryingchild would definitely generate, like, something thing, and if that agony was generated and taken and put on physical things in the form of like maybe stored in illusion disk and then put on physical things, it would allow Cryingchild's soul to bond to those things. So yeah, I think that's the solution. Is Cryingchild's soul is basically his consciousness, maybe through the agony, is then allowing him to possess all of the nightmares and do all these ghostly things that we're seeing. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. It's also pointing out that Cryingchild has always had an association with Foxy. Even from the very first game, there's the "It's me" on the Foxy sign. So it doesn't seem like he's forgotten that his brother wore a Foxy mask and tortured him. You know? So I think that's all the solution for the gameplay there. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't think there's not a whole lot more to about this game, except for like if you want any theories about like I guess Fredbear's family diner, um, and that it's clearly a separate location from Freddy's, meaning that the Springlock suits of Freddy's must have been different. I don't know how well I explained this in my first video, but just to kind of consolidate that, I believe that there were at least two, if well, okay, so the theory, right, is that, like, it also makes sense that the In Your Dream spot would be in the security breach location because it's probably built over the remnants of Fredbear's Family Diner because we know that there were replacement costumes there. We see them, right? In the Mimics chase scene, we see them and how they're fused together. And we know that they can't be from the original Freddy's because we know there are only two, meaning there would only be two costumes brought in to replace the Springlock suits, meaning that meaning that if there are three, it would imply there were three Springlock suits of Fredbear's. It's also worth pointing out that in the logbook, at the very end, right, the very end of the logbook, there's this weird picture of Chica that is never explained, has never kind of led to anything. It doesn't really have a good explanation, but it kind of taking a look see at it now. It looks almost yeah, that's a Springlock endoskeleton. Oh yeah, that's a Springlock endoskeleton, and also seems to have nightmare eyes. But I'm looking at it right now. It's heavily saturated. It to me that reads as a Springlock suit. So I think I could be telling us the three Springlock suits. And when you think of it, it makes sense, right? A lion, a bird, like a lion, a bird, and an elephant to replace a bunny, a bear, and a bird or a chicken. To me, I guess that could make sense. And so I guess there could just been a Chica Springlock suit at some point. I think that Logbook Chica looks a lot like a Springlock suit, and I think it could be telling us that at like Fredbear's Family Diner there was a Springlock suit. Well, I guess if it's Chica, it'd probably be at Freddy's, but then we know Chica would probably have been. I would also think that in FNAF 4 there are seemingly two. Like, there's this spring bodysuit that is on Fredbear, right? That's kind of like this brown with yellow eyes. But then there's another more greeny looking suit with a completely different head shape, different ears. So maybe there were two bunny animatronics at some point in this. Amazing. One was kind of maybe Bon Bunny, and then the other, I guess, I don't even know, would have been just some other. I mean, we know there are all kinds of variations of these animatronics by AR, so. And, we know there's Bonnet and Bon, and we know that Glamrock Bonnie. Yeah, I mean, it depends on at this point if we're taking Freddy in Space 3 completely seriously, but Glamrock Bonnie apparently seem to have been the Glamrock Bonbons. So it does seem to indicate that, like, multiple Bonnies could maybe have existed simultaneously. Hell, Withered Bonnie and Toy Bonnie, right? And Shadow Bonnie. It doesn't seem like it's completely off the table that maybe there was some other Springlock Bonnie at some point, or a Springlock Chico. Interesting. Very, very curious. So actually, maybe I should rectify my first FNAF 1 theory, that FNAF 1, 2, and 3 theory, that actually maybe it was a Springlock Chica and a Springlock Freddy. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Springlock Chica, Springlock Freddy, and then there were two kind of there was a Springlock Bonnie, or Bon Bunny, and then there was another Springlock Bunny, maybe just another Springlock Bonnie, we don't know. And then there was kind of Fredbear, which seemed to make sense to me just because their sprites are so very different. I know I know Scott doesn't do a great job keeping things consistent, but that is like, in terms of sprites and colors and all that. But like, it's so wildly different to me. I think it could make sense. Because it seems like there were three costumes replacing three characters of Fredbear's. Anyway, it does seem to indicate that, like, yep, Fredbear's, which we know, like, sister location bunker was built on, and we see the scooper, and it's unclear if it's the same scooper, but it does seem just like, yep, security breach is built upon FNAF 6, which is built upon Fredbear's, which would make sense to me. That's just, yeah, I think that makes sense. As for kind of the last really thing to talk about, FNAF 4 really doesn't have a lot. And it's just like, what's the gameplay? The story is very obvious, right? Right, and so it really was just to watch the gameplay. The last thing to talk about, I think, is the empty sister room. There's something more that will come up in my sister location video. I'm really trying to think. But there is the girl, right? The girl with pigtails and green eyes. Ginger pigtails. Just dark ginger. Yeah, and green eyes, who is all the animatronics come to life at night. So is it like by this? But I just don't see a world in which by this point. In fact, I can prove that this game must happen prior to well, it has to happen prior to the events of, prior to the events of the missing children incident, because Fredbear's here, and it confirms in Ultimate Custom Line again, it confirms. You use a Death Coin on Golden Freddy at, I believe, level 1, and you get a Fredbear jump scare. I'm not saying that means Crying Child's soul is like at Ultimate Custom Night. I don't think that makes sense, but I do think it is confirming. Like, it is straight up confirmation. The Fredbear suit that Crying Child died in, and the Golden Freddy suit, the one you should not have killed, is in same suit. It's the same suit. Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same, confirmed, like 100% confirmed. So by that kind of logic, I would say that therefore, like, the Fredbear suit has to be not in use and in a back room. And also, William is pretty strongly believed to have used a Springlock Bonnie suit. In fact, like, it is pretty much confirmed. Springlock Bonnie suit is what he used to kill the kids. That also would have to be in a back room. So we know that FNAF 4, 100%, like 100%, happens prior to the missing children, prior to the first missing children's incident. Like, it is 100% before that. So, how the hell does Pigtails Girl know that kids get stuffed into suits and then if you die your body is hidden? Because that doesn't make sense. It hasn't happened yet. It can't have happened yet. All of the evidence in the game, it can't have happened yet, the missing children's incident. So how then would she know about this rumour? Well, I just might have an explanation. If Elizabeth... So we know that the Crying Child's death saw something. We know that the Crying Child saw something, right? We are told that. Presumably, William seems to know what he saw if he's the one speaking for Fredbear, which he definitely is. I guess I haven't talked about that theory. Yeah, William is clearly talking through Fredbear. We see Fredbear in the office where William would be in sister location with a walkie-talkie. We see the cameras that he would have been using. So yeah, pretty clearly, he's also clearly the one who has to make the promise. He has to be the one making the promise to put the kid back together. So yeah, he's definitely Fredbear, which is the Fredbear plush. And for the Fredbear plush, we know that it had to be where the Crying Child had to see something that makes him scared of these animatronics, but not of the characters themselves, because he's caused the plush versions his friends. That William also must have been able to know what he saw, and also ideally it would explain that this girl knows that kids, or at least that people, die in these locations and then their bodies are hidden and no one is ever told what happened. And to me, I think that all indicate, and the stomach mouths as well on Nightmare and Nightmare Fredbear. To me, that, again, if we're saying that like the nightmares are generated to some extent through Crying Child's agony, and it's like the second iteration of William's experiments with them when Crying Child comes in. And originally it was just marionettes on strings with kind of nightmare on faces that were, also, I guess he does say, "Are you still dreaming?" Or do you still dream in the survival logbook? Which would imply these nightmare animatronics could have been the result of dreams. So maybe it was less so hallucinogen gas, and maybe more like a nightmare gas that causes people who sleep to have vivid nightmares. And then Crying Child comes in and maybe brings them to life to some extent. Because Michael clearly... Oh, I guess that's a piece of evidence I also didn't bring up. Michael clearly associates dreaming with Nightmare Fredbear. So yeah, if we're saying that like it's Crying Child's nightmares in some way coming to life to haunt Michael, then the stomach mouth would make sense. Okay, anyway, well, all of that evidence does seem to point toward also the empty girls' room in FNAF 4. In fact, we don't see Elizabeth anywhere. Like Elizabeth's hair and this girl's hair, clearly different colours, technically different shades of green. The eye shape, technically, of just the sprites in FNAF 4 and Sister Location done in different styles, so the eyes come up looking different. Definitely different colours associated with them. Like, they have similarities, but they don't seem the same, and their personalities, notably, I think that's the thing that really sets them apart, is that their personalities appear to be completely different, with Pigtails Girl knowing the rumours of this location that people go missing, and like, if this is Elizabeth, then why the hell would, knowing these rumours exist, why would you then go near an animatronic that your dad, who built the damn things, is telling you not to go in it? Like, that just doesn't make sense. But what if maybe a little had already been scooped? Now, I know people say that, Crying Child couldn't have seen it because if he did, he would have had to have been in the room, but that's not strictly true. He could have been looking from out of the room through a door, in which case he would have seen the entire thing. He also could have been incredibly young. Um, we'll get to. There's more of an interesting thing, but unfortunately very little evidence. We'll get to that. Either way, right. So Crandall could have seen Elizabeth skipping technically without being in the room, but then how does this pigtails girl know about it? Well, what if pigtails? Because you would assume the sister would be in the sister's room, right? Like the sister's room is empty, and like if they're gonna show us a sibling's bedroom, why don't they show us Foxy Bro's bedroom? But instead they just show us this extra sister's room. Is like yeah, all of it. I think could be telling us that Elizabeth was scooped prior to the events of Fnaf 4. Crying Todd saw that, and then yeah, and then the events of Fnaf 4 happen. In that case, who's this like ginger pigtails girl with green eyes who just stands around and tells about us these mysterious animatronics where bodies are hidden? Well, as far as we know, Elizabeth's body was never discovered. It was put inside of one of these animatronics. But in that case, they never tell anyone. What if, okay, this is going to be unpopular, I know this already, but what if Pigtails Girl is a robot? Some prototype version of Elizabeth. It might sound insane, but hear me out. She clearly, first off, she shares a connection. In fact, prior to Sister Location coming out, Matt Pat literally theorized that Pigtails Girl was the sister and was going to be the one possessing or in some way associated with Baby. And like thinking about it, the end result of Elizabeth's design is very similar. They're both gingers, although one's admittedly lighter than the other, but then Susie also has darker hair in this game, so I'm willing to just say that's just the style of FNAF 4. They both have green eyes, they both wear a skirt, like, there's enough connections between these two. Also, I guess kind of the way she speaks to Crying Child does give that vibe of maybe siblings. But again, the personality, as far as we know, doesn't seem to line up. And also the knowledge doesn't seem to line up. At no point do we get the idea that Elizabeth is this girl who spouts off these conspiracies or messes with people in this way. Where like it does seem to be a very fundamentally different personality. But again, by her being a prototype for a robot, Elizabeth would make sense. I mean, William isn't going to come out with a robotic version of one of his children, at this point only Elizabeth, if that robotic version is then going to fail or come up with some kind of obvious way of being found out to be a robot and then get him in hot water. First, he'd have to explain the kidnapping things, and he'd also have to explain him covering up his daughter's death, neither of which I imagine would go over particularly well with any kind of law enforcement or government. So definitely not, well, at the very least, not like a PR team or newspaper or anything like that. So it would make sense for him to kind of run a trial run of these robots, and that's what I suspect Pigtails Girl is. His first robotic creation. I mean, it makes sense, right? She's got pigtails like Baby. If Baby is supposed to be designed off of Elizabeth, then it makes sense that this robot that is supposed to be a kind of prototype to an Elizabeth bot would share design, similarities with Baby in the form of the pigtails. But then also share design similarities with Elizabeth in the form of the green eyes and ginger hair. Now consider what she says, right? She says that if you die, your body will be hidden, and then they'll never tell anyone, which definitely lines up with what William did. I mean, to an extent. Like, just imagine, right, that like she's been built in William Afton's bunker, and that she's just kind of powering on. Imagine what she'd be seeing, kind of for the first time. As far as she's concerned, she's going to see a girl's body inside of Baby. She'd definitely interpret that as being hidden. And then, and William isn't telling anyone. So, yeah, that seems to line up to me that that's how she would interpret that. And it makes sense that she would start these rumours. And yeah, obviously the end result of that is that I do think Elizabeth's death happens prior to the events of FNAF 4, which I think I can actually prove with one. I don't know if this is really going to Sister Location, but we'll just prove it here. Yeah, I guess that makes more sense. It's more relevant to this game timeline-wise, because it helps this game's point in the timeline. We know that Sister Lucky. Well, we know that. Okay, it's worth pointing out. Circus Baby's Pizza World is notably a different place than Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental. Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental was a thing William Afton's doing out of his basement. But Circus Baby's Pizza World was something he was very intentional. Was a restaurant. It was a restaurant and a physical location he was setting up. At the start of this location, there's this monologue about, it was clear the stage was set for another entertainer and another competitor in children's entertainment, whatever. That is talking about Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals after the closing down of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which tells us that the kind of the gameplay of this location is happening after the events of the first Missing Children incident and the first Freddy Fazbear shutting down. Not to spoil anything from this location too much. It's not referring to Circus Baby's Pizza World, which I've seen some people say, but that doesn't make sense. Why would he be talking? He's talking about rentals, right? And he's talking about rentals the whole time, and then why would he suddenly start talking about Pizza World? That doesn't make sense. Again, just look at context. So no, there's no reason to think that Pizza World couldn't have been around at the same time as some of the others. We also see, the Mangle in the girls' room, but that doesn't make sense because Toy Foxy, which we know the Mangle is. A lot of people have been like, "Oh, Mangle is fun." It's not. It can't be because we're told in FNAF 2 that Mangle is from Toy Foxy. The toys were created for that location in 1987. They can't be around yet, which means that this Mangle thing has to be it has to be something else. And the only thing I can think of really that it could be is some prototype version of Funtime Foxy or just Funtime Foxy. Which you may think means that the location hasn't been opened yet, but I think there's more evidence to point towards the fact it has. Again, everything I said, stomach mouths, what he saw. The only way there could be rumors about these places about bodies being hidden is if it was talking about Elizabeth. Really, we don't know anyone else who went disappearing from Circus Baby's Pizza World or who would have gone disappearing by this point, except for Miss Avenue. We'll get into that later. Furthering on from that, then, I believe you have. What was I talking about? Yeah, right. Elizabeth. Right, yeah, okay. Circus Baby's Pizza World must have been opened prior to the events of FNAF 4 because we know it had a Springlock suit. And we know that Springlock suits were shut down really prior to the first Missing Children incident. So we know that at the very least, the first Missing Children incident, but by this point, the Springlock suits are no longer in use, thanks to an incident in a sister location, which has to be Fredbear's, because we know that the Springlock suit in Babies was never used, at least not in the way it was supposed to be used, which tells me that that's a Springlock suit. If the Springlock suit was never used, but it was clearly intended to be in the location, and keep in mind the location was only ever open for one day, and then Elizabeth got scooped, and then they claimed gas leaks, and then everything got shut down and never reopened. So that's why the Springlock suit was never used. And then William never used it when he was in his own personal little bunker, I suppose. But the fact that there was a Springlock suit intended for this location tells us that it can't have been opened prior to the Springlock suits getting shut down. Springlock suits are still in use in FNAF 4, meaning that it had to have been opened around this point in the timeline. And it's strongly theorized that FNAF 4 is the reason why Springlock suits people stop using Springlock suits. The theory is that Crying Child's death, and to me that makes a lot of sense because while it was technically the animatronic component that killed him, it's a cover-up, right? Fazbear Entertainment loves their cover-ups. I definitely just see a world in which they were like, yep, no, that was a Springlock suit thing. Regular animatronics won't, because it's better that, sure, these expensive Springlock suits, they can't use them anymore. That's better than not being able to use any animatronics, And, just being associated with the death of a child is never really good for any mechanical, really anything being associated with a child's death is not really good for anything or anyone in terms of PR and public, scrutiny. And also, we just don't really know, unless it was just a random employee died in the Springlock suit. And we also know there were multiple simultaneous Springlock failures, which simultaneous would imply multiple went off anyway, right? Because simultaneous means at the same time. It's clearly not going to be referring to suits. So to me, multiple simultaneous Springlock failures means one Springlock can fail, sure, but this is many Springlocks failing at once, and this must have happened multiple times. And I just don't like. But that's kind of boring, and we wouldn't know exactly when in the timeline things were shut down, except that it was prior to the first missing children incident, which seems prior to this game, or it is post this game. But the fact that there is a Springlock suit intended to be used tells us that it has to be happening seemingly before Crying Child's death. We don't necessarily know that's what got Springlock suits out of commission, but it seems reasonable because it's the last time we see Springlock suits actually in use in the timeline. We never see them in use after that event. We have no reason to think that just wasn't the event that got Springlock suits to not be in use anymore. So it feels reasonable to assume Crying Child's death is what led to Springlock suits getting, out of commission, which means that for there to have even been a Springlock suit, and like Baby says, it's from my old pizzeria, so Circus Baby's Pizza World, which means that, by this point, which means that it had to have been in the pizzeria, right? The Springlock suit must have been in the pizzeria at some point, which to me indicates that the pizzeria must have been opened prior to Crying Child's death, and therefore just prior to the events of FNAF 4. Unless obviously that incident didn't cause Springlock suits to be shut down, but we don't really have any evidence of that. No evidence that Fredbear's Family Diner was open beyond, or that Springlock suits were in use beyond that. In fact, even Charlie's death, which in the books I believe was at a Fredbear's Family Diner, is at a Freddy Fazbear's, because we see that there's a Freddy there with Cupcake. So either they were moved to Fredbear's Family Diner, which I don't think is very likely, especially not for your mascot, or she just died outside of a Freddy Fazbear's, which would explain why the puppet is in a Freddy Fazbear's. So we really don't have any, we can't say either way that this is definitely what Springlock suits shut down from use, but we can logically kind of indicate it. Other pieces of evidence that indicate that Circus Babies were shut down prior, or that Elizabeth's death happens prior to FNAF 4, is Bellaura's song, which is clearly, it also, I think it appeared recently in Help Wanted 2. Which has lyrics like, an empty room, an empty tomb, and, basically it seems to be about a parent grieving about, two things: their child's death, and also the fact that their husband or their partner appears to have become distant post a child's death. Which doesn't make sense because we don't see Miss Afton anywhere. By FNAF 4, we don't see Miss Afton anywhere. And, whether Bellora is literally Miss Afton or just a representative of her, does seem to imply that at some point Miss Afton was annoyed at William not being around her, not being around the family, pushing himself into his work in grief. But that couldn't have happened because of Crying Child's death, because we don't see her. We might see her in Midnight Motorist, but I don't think so. I don't think we see her in Midnight Motorist. I don't think it's her in Midnight Motorist. Because for reasons we'll get into that are more more apply to my sister location video, but we don't have any other reason to assume that Bellaura's song would be in relation to the events of FNAF 4 as opposed to Elizabeth's death. It's also just Elizabeth's game, so why wouldn't we assume that Bellora would be about Elizabeth's death? And also we see an empty room in FNAF 4. So now imagine, right, that kind of. Right, I think that's everything. Oh, and then we see in the breaker room minigame that the power for the sister location kind of area, just the entirety of Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals, also links to. It also links to the observation rooms for the FNAF 4 gameplay, and even the Fredbear's Family Diner itself. So it would indicate that this kind of place, were definitely open. It would indicate these places were open around the same time and just had they seemed to be getting power from a similar place. There's also Yendo, which again we'll talk more about, but he does seem to have a lot of connections to Golden Freddy. So, I mean, if you want to talk about, crying child being put back together potentially through animatronics first, and then turn into a robot later, Yendo would kind of be your guy. But again, that's for sister location. Um, as for Foxy Bro, I think we can confirm he's definitely Michael Afton. I think Step Closer and the Survival Logbook both confirm that. Step Closer just having many connections between Michael Afton, or having multiple connections between Pete, Michael Afton, and Foxy Bro, him seeming to be a parallel to both of them, which would indicate they're the same person. Then the Survival Logbook having references to FNAF 4 while also having references to one chewing gum, which links to Pete, but also from Step Closer, and then also obviously so many references to Sister Location, proving this is definitely the Michael Afton we all know and love. So, as for the others, I think it's pretty agreed upon at this point, thanks to Hub 102, that Bonnie Bully is Cassie's dad. Freddy Bully, I mean, there's not a whole lot of evidence for. I just kind of like to think he's the Bite of 87 victim because, it's ironic. He caused a bite, or at least was involved in the Bite of 83. He gets Bite of 87. The whole game. Again, we know that there was just some unknown secondary person who seems to have been the Bite of 87 victim. So, in the gameplay of that game, which is the same, even though we don't play as him, but whatever, involves a Freddy mask. So, for that to be the Freddy mask bully game just makes sense. As for the Chica bully, I don't really know. I mean, there's not really anyone who would make a whole lot of sense, really. I don't know. Guess Chica bully would I don't know. Maybe if we ever get a game about Chica's Party World, we'll see anything. We'll see what became of Chica bully. Does seem that all of them got pretty. Does seem that the other two got pretty terrible fates. One got bit of 87 and lost his frontal lobe. The other died and ended up in mass to see his daughter run away. Maybe Chica Bully is, I mean, I don't know, Phone Dude's dad or Phone Dude's older brother or something. Like, I don't think he can be Phone Dude because by this point, like, he'd be in his 40s at least. It just wouldn't make sense. In fact, we can do some fun math though. If you take the height of Spring Bonnie minus the years, important, and also don't misremember it like I did my first time, and then remove the ears like I didn't my first time, and then kind of divide that by the amount of lines it takes up. You can work out the average length for every line and work out the heights of both of them. I have it here. Yeah, I took the height of Springtrap and just assumed it was the same height as Spring Bonnie, removed the ears, like the person, the post, kind of took all of the models from, I believe it was all of the models from Help Wanted and put them against each other to work out heights because some animatronics already had canon heights and you could kind of use that to help. Anyway, it kind of gives you that Crying Child is 3'2", Foxy Bro is 3'9", which makes Crying Child about 3.5 years old. He can round up because, I mean, either you could round down because it was his birthday or round up because his dad is like 6 foot and it would make logical sense for him to be tall. Also, Foxy Bro Foxy Bro has very similar logic. You can kind of work out that Foxy Bro kind of has to be Foxy Bro, because we know Michael is a spitting image of his dad. You can work out that he's somewhere roughly between 13 and 14. You can just round up, say he's a tall 13-year-old, which is fun because it would then make them like, you know, three. It makes them 3 and 13, 10-year age difference, which is actually the amount of time mentioned in the story with Rory. Obviously, that wasn't intentional, but it's just a fun little thing you can do. But just to consolidate, I think I have mentioned every question. Yeah, I don't think there's any questions. There's a boy who looks like Balloon Boy. I don't think there's any lore there. You see the Freddy mask, Willie. He's the only one who you see without a mask, including Foxy Bro, which is maybe fun because he's laughing at you on a street. There's just there's nothing else. I don't think. I think I've mentioned every single thing. So just to consolidate the lore, I think in terms of timeline placement, FNAF 4 happens. I think it's the earliest. Happens after Elizabeth's death. Happens before pretty much every other game. The gameplay all happens. Grandchild dies in a coma. Seems like he would have nightmares. And then in the process, and then all of the Springlock suits get shut down. William performs experiments on the Springlock suit. building off of the experiments he's done on Baby and Elizabeth. And he manages to store agony in illusion discs. He's been experimenting on Michael as well, with marionettes on strings and nightmare gas, and then he switches that to illusion discs and animatronics and agony, which he uses to split crying child's soul or consciousness, whichever one you want to say, through the nightmares to allow all of the supernatural activity we see. And all of that probably happens in 1987 because there's a TV that says 1987. And Scott, on one of MatPat's old videos, literally commented and said, this was a prediction theory, but it came out after the game came out, but MatPat was off somewhere else, so we couldn't change it. And Scott was all, oh, good theory, but you've missed a crucial detail that points that this game couldn't be about the Bite of 87 victim, even though it was a prediction theory, but, made before the game was supposed to come out, but then it came out after the game came out, because Scott loves to release games early. And, which seems to indicate that, 1987 is the year, pretty much confirmed. I'm also pretty sure at some point Scott confirmed that. So that's all the lore for this game. I think Pigtails Girl is probably just a robot, a prototype to humanoid robots that William was using to kind of test the waters. That's why it's outside of Fredbear's. We're like, oh, if it becomes a robot, he can just say, it's a fun new robot I'm designing. Don't worry about it. It makes for an easy cover-up. But it would have seen Elizabeth's body inside a baby, and so that would explain where the rumours came from. I also think it makes sense that William would have designed the kidnapping robot, because think about what we're saying, right? William goes from kidnapping to killing. It's a very logical kind of villainous growth from one crime to a much more worse crime. But now I have one final twist, one final theory for this video that is going to make everyone very mad at me, and that I probably should have included in the name section, but you know what, I don't care. So whatever. Okay, earlier I should probably have mentioned that in Security Breach there's this photo of a brown-haired, brown-eyed girl on the FNAF 4 bed, which could either imply the crying child has been retconned into a girl in a similar way that Charlie was, in which case Cassidy would still work because it's a gender-neutral name. Cassidy's such a good name. Or it could imply a connection between another prominent brown-haired, brown-eyed character in these games, Charlie. And surely, and also Nightmare On takes the place of Nightmare, and if, that feels like a logical connection between Crying Child and, and Charlie, the puppet. And also they both are associated with tear streaks, and they both have stripes, black and white stripes. So sure, there are all these connections. But, well, what if he's Sammy Emily? Except not actually Sammy Emily, but the physical. Because we know that at some point there was, in the books, right, Charlie had a twin brother called Sammy. And based on the fact that this was an actual picture, and the fact that their mum was there, it would indicate at the very least that this is a real picture, that Sammy is a real person, but not apparently in the book, but clearly, but he wasn't the one actually kidnapped, right? The real Charlie was kidnapped, and the robotic Charlie was simply told that it was Sammy to, I guess, stop from the charade ending. But the question then becomes, how did Sammy... if there's a real picture of Sammy, Sammy must be a real person. So where is Charlotte's twin? What if it's Crying Child? I mean, there are a lot of connections between the two. They both could have died at age 3. In 1983, if the books are to be believed. So already, that's a big connection. They're both associated with animatronics that I personally would associate with teleporting. Golden Freddy clearly teleports. The puppet is described as being able to go anywhere in FNAF 2. That sounds like teleportation to me. Explains why you can't stop it once it starts to get to your office. Again, wealth of design similarities. So already it feels like there's a massive connection between the two. And now consider how Clara looks in Immortal and the Restless, and how Miss Afton looks or how Miss Emily looks in the graphic novels. It's the same. There's a back hair swoop, there's a front hair swoop, blonde hair, black eyes. So already it feels like that makes a lot of sense. It then also feels like it gives a lot of motive. to William. That, if because one thing that's always stuck out to me about FNAF 6 is that, like, one of the endings ends with him giving your character a lobotomy, which is weird if you're playing as Michael because he's, like, undead. But also weird that, like, Henry would do that to Michael in the first place. It doesn't indicate that there's exactly a great like between the two of them. Hell, he even says the job listing wasn't intended for you, implying he didn't even want Michael to get there in the first place. Despite the fact that you would think, like, Michael going down with the ship and being willing to go down with the ship, which is what Henry suspects he'll want to do, it would be better than creating an exit and risking any of the animatronics getting out and ruining your big plan, right? Like, and yet instead he's his intended person to be in that job, who isn't the main character of who isn't Michael, would have wanted to escape. Like, that's just weird to me. That's very, very weird to me that you would choose. And it just implies to me, like, maybe there isn't much of a liking between Henry. Like, I feel like in the fandom, it largely seems like, oh, Henry's this great guy. And, he's like a second father to Michael, or even a first father, maybe better than William. But what if, like, there's just actually, like, quite a dislike between the two, which is how it reads to me. I mean, we know there were multiple simultaneous Springlock failures. What if one of them happened to Henry? Because of Michael. I mean, Michael's known for causing incidents involving the Fredbear Springlock suit. Fredbear was Henry's Springlock suit. Effectively, what I'm trying to say is, what if Miss Emily and Miss Afton are one in the same? I mean, this is just a crack theory, like, it has so little evidence, but it's incredibly interesting and really solidifies the connection between these characters for me. Like, what if Miss Afton cheated on William with Henry, which makes sense because one of William's primary colours of purple is the colour affair, and it doesn't seem like it. Like, there's no evidence of William committing an affair for all we've seen of him in all pieces of media, so it feels like it would make sense that it would be Miss Afton. It would also explain why Miss Afton never ends up showing up. Could also explain the whole "the baby isn't mine" thing, It must mean that at some point there was plausible deniability between William and Clara, to give this idea that potentially a child of theirs wasn't actually theirs. I mean, the joke of that show is obviously that the child is his, but I feel that's something a lot of theorists tend to overlook. And to me, it seems very obvious that the storyline of that show would be that, after they rekindle at the end of season one, or whatever season it was that Will Michael was watching in Sister Location, they rekindle, but he still refuses to accept the child isn't his, and they go their separate ways, and Clara meets someone else. She's about to marry him, but then through some convoluted series of events, Vlad ends up hanging out with the child. He realizes that he does love the child, and he's willing to be a father, and he bursts into the wedding, right as they're about to say I do, or they're like, oh, does anyone have any objections to this wedding? And Vlad bursts in, he's like, Claire, the baby is mine, oh, Vlad, and then happily ever after, the family's back together, he accepts his duties as a father, and it's great. I think we can all agree that is how that show would end. So clearly the baby is his. I don't think it's saying one of the Aftons isn't his, but I think it's saying at some point there must have been a plausible reason for him to not think that one of them was. And while a lot of people associate it with Mike, I do think it could make sense with Crying Child. And it would just imply to me that, like, at some point Clara must have been sleeping with other people for him to have even believed this. So Clara cheats on William with Henry, which then, I believe, causes an argument between Michael and Henry. Pure fanfiction, but Michael pushes Henry potentially while he's in a Springlock suit, causes a Springlock incident, but Henry survives, obviously. And then the family kind of breaks up. Some twins are born. Fun fact: there is a rare condition called heteropaternal superfecundation, which is basically when twins are able to have different fathers. It's an incredibly rare occurrence, and Scott probably didn't know about it, but it is technically possible. The other option is that Charlie just, is William's kid, which maybe, maybe. I don't know if there's much evidence for that, but keep an eye out. Maybe there is. Maybe there is. I mean, I believe she wears purple, green, and yellow, and at the very least, like, purple and yellow. Oh, yeah, I think she wears purple or something. In the books, maybe. I don't know, maybe. Maybe he believes that baby was stolen from him. We don't know. Maybe that explains his motivation for killing Charlie. Maybe it's kind of a if I can't have her, no one can kind of think maybe that's the reason he was designing kidnapping animatronics in the first place. I don't know. But either way, whether it's, the rare case of twins having different fathers, or maybe both of them are Williams, but they never found out. Who knows? But either way, she has twins. One of them goes to William. So in a sense, William did steal away Sammy, but not like actually. And one of them goes towards Henry, and maybe they don't ever go into a court of law, so they never actually get DNA tests. So they're never fully sure. But then where does Miss Afton end up? Well, I would have to imagine she ends up with Henry, because I don't see her being allowed to go back to the Afton household. And I think that's when William strikes. I believe William used Ballora as a way to kill Miss Afton as revenge, potentially, for cheating on him in that way. I don't know, maybe. Again, kind of a crack theory, kind of, ridiculous and off the walls and very little evidence, but there just seems to be a weird connection between Crying Child and Charlie, so the idea of them being twins just feels like it fits. It would then explain Michael's anger at Crying Child, and also just like, okay, let's see, Crying Child's sister, Elizabeth, in the books, possesses a version of Charlie. So literally, Crying Child's sister is Charlie, but not literally, she's possessing a robotic version of Charlie. Baby, again, possessed by his sister in the books, can turn into Charlie. Like both Charlie and Elizabeth are associated with green. Like, there are all these connections between Elizabeth and Charlie, and Crying Child and Charlie, and there are probably connections between Michael and Charlie, but I don't know of any. And it just, I guess Happiest Day, even, like, I've always thought that the Aftons seem to have particularly powerful souls. Elizabeth can manipulate, the eyes of Baby. Crying Child can cause full-on hallucinations, even seeming to be able to manipulate reality to an extent. Michael possesses his own corpse. Like the Aftons just seem to have powerful souls, and then there's Charlie, able to kind of put souls at rest and free them from whatever the mini games were. Like, enact Happiest Day. So even that, again, there's just a lot of weird connections between the Afton kids and Charlie, to the point where I'm kind of like, could they be? Could she be an Afton in disguise, secretly an Afton? Or at the very least, like a twin of one of the Aftons? Because again, literally, Crying Child's sister possesses a version of Charlie. A robotic version, but still a version of Charlie. I don't know, that's just a theory. But thanks for watching. This was probably, I probably sounded insane, but that's just a theory I've had kicking in my head for so long that I felt I needed to get it out there. Thanks for watching, and bye. I was originally gonna, have a theory about, Crying Child's name being Abel, because this theory's been, because I've been procrastinating on making this theory for so damn long with the FNAF movie, and Help 1 and 2 came out. And, I was gonna be all, his name's Abel, because if you look at all these connections between Abby and Crying Child, she wears a striped shirt, she's wearing a teddy bear at one point, she's holding a teddy bear at one point, she's standing next to Golden Freddy in the poster, like, all these connections, and Abel was a brother killed by his older brother in the Bible, so it would make sense. He was the first, but then, no, Abby wasn't even an Afton, so that theory was pretty much shot dead in the water.